I was just gobsmacked how uncurious or incurious some of the national media is. There is one narrative, and particularly they have Arizona in their sights. They like to put Arizona in their sights every few years. They have Arizona in their sights again. And you've been doing great yeoman's work on Twitter and anywhere you can elsewhere to kind of put things in perspective. I'm going to let you go ahead and put things in perspective. The sky is not falling in Arizona. Please explain, Andy.
Yeah, so, it's really important that people realize we have more testing. We have naturally what comes with that is more people are going to be detected with the virus. That's what I would refer to it as. They're being detected. CDC said about 10 days ago that we might have 10 times as high, as many people really who have had COVID or actually have it as we're reporting. And so when you see that number, if that's the only number you pick, you say, oh my goodness, we had 3,800 or 4,200 people today with new cases today. If that's all you ever looked at, you would freak out and you say, that's pretty astounding. But then when you start plugging in the context of all of this, what does it look like on the hospitalizations? Well, the hospitalizations, the most we've ever had in a single day hospitalized is 99, according to AZDHS, Department of Health Services. And yet for the last 3 weeks, we haven't released or discharged from the hospital any fewer than 200. So you kind of get a feel for putting this stuff into perspective. Then you start looking at what's the case fatality rate? What does that look like? Well, it's fallen down to right around 1.8%. And if it really is 10 times as many people who have it as we've detected, then that would be 0.18%, yes, which would be well below normal flu season. So the numbers are cherry-picked set sometimes to do a narrative. And I'm not trying to do a narrative. I'm just looking at the data and saying, why isn't anybody talking about discharges? Why isn't anybody talking about the case fatality rate? Why isn't anybody talking about how the hospitalization rate in Arizona has dropped by over 100% in the last 3 weeks? These are things I think are important.
They are important because the other side, the other narrative that we are getting, which is sky falling, cases matter, cases large, cases big, that story continues to create the theme and context for the policies that a lot of us think are overwrought and are actually harmful, societally harmful, economically harmful, psychologically and psychiatrically harmful. Let's put things in perspective. The chances of getting this are very low. Very low.
That's correct.
If you get it, go ahead. Yeah. You go ahead. You take it. You go ahead.
No, that's what I was going to say. If you start looking at it, where have we increased? Well, age 20 to 44. That's where we've had almost exactly half of our cases in known cases in Arizona come from that demographic. And in reality, we all are starting to know people who've had COVID, and so this is starting to work its way through. But the question is, how many of those people are seriously ill or to the point where they need a ventilator?
5% need hospitalization. Let's put it that way.
Right.
95.
Yeah,
let's put it the other way. 95% don't need hospitalization, and that's lower than it was this time last month by half.
That's correct. After we opened up.
That's right.
After we opened up.
That's right. That's right. Now, that's an interesting thing, that age group that takes you from 20 to 44. What is it? Is that the category?
Yes.
Age group. That's an interesting thing because it's the only age category that really covers about 2 decades. Do you notice that? These numbers are increasingly high in that category, whereas every other age category is about a 10-year segment. So I want people to be aware of that too.
Yeah, no, that's important. So that really becomes it. You used to hear there are lies, damn lies, and statistics.
Right.
And so when you look at the statistics and data, and what you said is so critical, and that's why I'm trying to just say this is the data that we see.
Yeah, you double the age rate, and surprise, surprise, those numbers might be a little bigger than the other age rates.
Exactly. But that's the age rate that the age outside of 0 to 20 that can handle the virus with the least vulnerability to a very serious condition, and when you shut down bars or you say you can't go tubing on the Salt River or whatever, what you're doing is you're saying to those people, we're not going to allow you to have the choice. And that becomes a bit of a problem. In other words, policies are being developed on this data.
That's the point.
And if you skew the data or look at it wrong or you take it out of context, you're going to have a rationale to do a certain policy. And if you get all of the data, I think you're going to have a rationale to say, well, you know what? Let's do free. Let's be free. That's the real issue. And let's provide the most protection we can for the most vulnerable. That's really where you want to go. Is who's the most vulnerable? The elderly, where, by the way, they have probably about 11% of all the cases are people over 65, but over 70, somewhere right around 74 to 75% of all the fatalities are in that age group. So you see, that is the group. I would look at it and I say we should be really trying to protect that group more than any other, because they are truly the most vulnerable.
And on the other side, conversely, Andy, the talk today out of Washington having to do with Donald Trump's roundtable on education is that the group least affected should not be the most harmed, which is the school children. Schools should be open. Schools are where children belong. It helps the children. It helps the families. It helps the parents. There is no reason. There is no more legitimate, rational, scientific, or any other reason for schools to be closed.
Well, and that's why, Seth, you're seeing schools being reopened everywhere from Taiwan, Japan, throughout Europe. And by the way, speaking of roundtables, House Freedom Caucus is doing its own roundtable this Thursday, live streaming it at 10 a.m. We've got docs and pediatricians coming in, et cetera. We'll talk about this. And that's why, Seth, you get back to the American Academy of Pediatricians. That's why they said last week, we've already seen potentially irreparable harm done to, or damage done to kids who were denied school beginning in the spring of 2020. And they say, of course, they want it to be safe. They want you to take precautions, etc. But they said kids need to be back in school. And I just want the best teaching to be done that we possibly can. And we're seeing teachers unions, some across the country, that are saying we don't want to go back.
Yeah,
we don't want to go back.
Yeah, no, there's an old Shakespeare line: "Don't trouble the poor with begging." Don't expect help from the teachers unions here. Of course not.
Right.
Andy Biggs.
Yeah.
Thank God for you. We love you, and we appreciate your voice. We appreciate your analysis. May it continue ever to grow stronger.